There we go. Right, so the recording's going. So, John, what I'll do is I'll just introduce this, and then John, hopefully Kevin will have joined by then, and we can hand over for your presentation. We're just going to do not the full one that we've done before, John, but just the presentation of the prototype that you've built.
Cool. Thanks,
so, great stuff. So, so just by way of introduction, a couple of weeks ago, just thinking ahead of what might likely transpire in terms of this COVID issue, we had asked Microsoft to pull together a workshop to help us think about how we might respond from a technology perspective and supporting a change in the way we do things, given the pressures that we likely would expect to happen around COVID. And why we talk to Microsoft, so we're already engaged with Microsoft around the regulatory platform. So think about how we might do things differently in the future, and think about how we might do things in terms of the smarter regulation world that Vicky's been talking about. Microsoft have a team, Catalyst team, that are engaged with us around some design thinking workshops around how we can do things differently, more efficiently, etc. And in fact, Microsoft have been out on a number of inspections with colleagues and had done quite a bit of work around this already. So we're really well placed to help us with these workshops. So last Monday and Tuesday, we took Microsoft very kindly hosted us down in Reading, and we had a significant number of people from across the organisation, largely inspection managers and inspectors, but people from cross-discipline to disciplinary groups, both in the room and on a Teams call, to answer the exam question, which is, if we're going into this period of time where we're expecting to have significant challenges, reduction in capacity around CQC, a reduction in capacity around our providers, the added complexity of the virus and us not wanting to add to the problem of transmission around the virus, so therefore a likely reduction in the amount of crossing the threshold that we would be able to do. How do we continue to fulfill our purpose of keeping people safe and promoting improvement? And so that was the question. What came out of that really intense 2-day workshop, led by inspection colleagues, we ended up with the 2 key questions that we wanted to ask. So again, bearing in mind we may have a reduction in capacity, where would we want to focus our attention? So how could we look at the risk? How we look at the data that we have to create really good informed decisions about where we're going to focus our attention? And secondly, how could we massively simplify and streamline what we currently do in terms of our inspection or assessment process, using technology to help us do this in a much more simplified way, and to support a way in which we were working remotely. You're bearing in mind, if you look at the current processes around inspection, there's a huge amount of activity that happens, and a lot of manual activity that happens prior to an inspection, and subsequently there's a huge amount of administration that happens after creation of reports, etc. So the question was, how could we design this sort of simplified inspection methodology that would allow us to focus on safety and promoting improvement during these unprecedented times. There is a kind of an additional question that we asked ourselves as well, which is, bearing in mind we are the only sort of agency that has a relationship with all adult social care providers and independent health, how could we simply make it easy for them to feedback information on what kind of challenges that they were having, particularly around COVID, and what sort of issues they might have in terms of supply of medical supplies or PPE or that sort of thing, and that's something that Department of Health are very keen for us to be able to support with, sort of creating that national picture around what the problems are in adult social care, and how then could we potentially direct support to to the adult social care community. So at the end of that that 2 days of workshops, inspection colleagues had essentially designed this simplified inspection methodology, looking at safety, primarily looking around regulations 12 and 17, which are focused around safety, and Microsoft then went away for a couple of days to work out how do we swiftly create a prototype of what would be able to support us in managing this these asks in short order, and so I'll hand over in a second to John and Kevin, who are on the call, who can show us what we've done. Now, this is a prototype, so it needs to be turned into a production. So there's a bit more work that we need to do to get it into an environment that we can release it out to a number of inspectors, and we can get this running. Obviously, things are moving very quickly. Since the prototype has been created, then we've recently taken the decision that we would stop our scheduled inspections, but this would still provide an ability for us to provide this sort of level of assurance around safety during these circumstances with any providers that we deem to engage with. So what I'll do is sort of hand over to, I'm not sure if it's John or Kevin, one of you will pick up and present your screen and give us a brief demonstration of what we've created, and then we can open up for questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. Hi, it's John. So let me share my screen, and please do let me know when that's come through.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. You can see that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. And really helpful introductions to the work we did, Mark. Thank you for that. And as Mark referenced, we've created 2 subtly different but associated prototypes as a result of the work that we undertook with CQC colleagues last week. So the first one that I'm going to show you is a data capture, an engagement process with predominantly adult social care providers, a way of capturing that information. We've done this through a very simple forms package that we have available. So the way that this would work is a provider would receive an email invite to complete the survey. As well as being distributed by email, it's equally possible for this to be filled in by proxy. Someone from CQC could contact the provider and could fill in on their behalf. But they would get an invite to the survey. They'll hit a button to respond to that, and that will open up for them a very simple form. Couple of points to make at this stage. These were just example questions that we put in for the purposes of the prototype. I know we were on a call earlier today with some CQC colleagues finalising the actual questions that will form part of this data capture. So that piece of work is underway. We can go and we can put some responses into this form. So are we experiencing shortage of medical supplies, for example? How many staff are infected with COVID? Are there any issues you'd like to raise with CQC or Department of Health? Then we go ahead and we just hit on submit, and that will send that back in. So the whole concept of this was to make it as lightweight and as simple as we could for the providers to quickly submit that information. And the idea there is that will go off weekly, potentially weekly, to the providers to respond, and then we can track those responses over time. Couple of quick comments on the responses. So we get an overall breakdown of the various number of invitations and responses that have gone out, and we can drill down on a question by question basis and get full metrics and analysis of all the data that's coming back in. The other thing that we can then start to do is to automate some actions off of it. So if, for instance, someone has said they have a concern or they are short of a specific medication, we can put some rules in there that help surface those particular responses to CQC staff who can then go ahead and action them. So that was a very, very brief overview of how the survey side of the 2 prototypes worked. Moving on to the revised inspection methodology, and please forgive us, we use all of this vocabulary very guardedly, so we're very mindful that we will have got some phrases wrong, some terminology wrong. One of the things that has come out in the playbacks that we've done to CQC colleagues in recent days was that inspection is almost certainly the wrong word, and that's likely to be changed. Our assessments was one that was shared and seemed to be quite widely approved of, actually, rather than starting to use terminology that confuses one thing with another. So yeah, please forgive us for any minor mistakes we've made on that front. But what you're looking at right here is an application that we have put together to help support this interim methodology. The view that you can see on screen is a breakdown of active locations, locations being service user endpoints, providers that are delivering services to service users. We got this data from your website, so this is all based upon information that you're publishing out. We can click on any of these locations, we can open them up, we can look at who the specific provider is, location IDs, the type of provider, so is it a PMS, is it ASC, you know, across the various domains that you're supporting, so all of that is in there. We've got addressing information, and we pull through things like the date of the last inspection along with the overall rating from the last inspection. So the intention here was to pull together a summary of each location and a high-level history that you've had with that location. Just touching back to the survey that we looked at a moment ago, we've also tagged each survey response into the provider. So we can take a look at any instance of a survey they've sent back. We can see the survey itself, and we can look at all of the questions that they've submitted and what their answers are. So again, although this particular application is about supporting the interim methodology, we're trying to recognise that what comes in from the survey is really key to the inspectors to potentially understand how they move forward and understand what's going on with that provider. So we've tried to get everything into one neat location for you. Going back to that list of locations, these are all completely sortable and filterable. So for instance, I can ask the system just to show me locations where COVID-19 has been declared through the survey. Or we could say, show me any locations that are good and outstanding. And in this case, we're asking it to show me any locations that require a decision for, I'll use the term assessment in this case. So one of the things we discussed in detail with the intelligence team and with Mark was how we go about the identification of where we apply the new methodology. And we have a number of ways of doing that. So a lot of that could come in directly from modeling the intelligence team has done. For the purposes of the prototype, what we decided was we would take every location where the previous inspection was more than 12 months old and where the overall rating was not good or outstanding. So for the small number of records we imported, this resulted in 6 that required decision. So if we assume at this point I'm an inspector, I clearly need somewhere that I go that helps me understand my work and what I need to do. So in order to support that, we've built a simple dashboard, inspector level. And this gives us a breakdown of various decisions that I need to make for assessments. So I've got 6 assessment decisions to make. And I've got a list here of the various assessments that I'm working on. So that could be desk-based assessments or mobile assessments. So if I go up and I open one of these assessments due, what this is going to do is show me the record for this particular location. In this case, it's Sunnyside, it's a social care organisation. We can see their last inspection was back in July 2018. Their overall rating was inadequate, so all of that has come through from the information we already have. What I need to do is declare how we're going to move forward with this assessment. And in this case, I'm going to make it a mobile inspection. I can choose mobile or desktop. I can choose to do nothing, or I could move it out into targeted, which will mean it will effectively fall outside of this particular tool, but we're recognizing that a deeper level of understanding is required. I'm just going to say I need mobile. I'm going to put a terrible answer in here as to in terms of justifying why I'm choosing this. And one of the reasons this field is in here and has become mandatory, so I can't move on until I've completed it, is the inspectors and CQC colleagues were incredibly clear that at every stage through this process, everything had to be auditable and everything had to be trackable. So every time you make a decision, every time you undertake an action, we're recording the decision, we're recording the action, and we're recording why that action was determined as well. What we've then done is automatically captured when the decision was made, who made it, and all of that is stamped into the database. At the same time, because we've said that we need to make a decision, we need to undertake a mobile inspection, pardon me, we've created this interim inspection or interim assessment record. If I open that up, we'll see within here we've got a breakdown of questions. Now, these are predominantly right now in the prototype, these are from regulations 12 and 17. I know there's discussion ongoing around the specifics of what regulations and what questions need to be included, and I'll make the point throughout this. Everything that you're seeing here is all configuration. None of this is hard coded, so all of these questions can be changed and updated. But what we've essentially done is recreated these questions. We've added some answers, and we've added some explanatory text, which was all provided to us by Mark and the team. In the background, there is a scoring model. So the inspector doesn't need to see that, but that's there. And every time we answer a question, we're applying a score. And then as we go through the form, that score is ultimately accumulated, and the score results in what we have called a satisfactory or an unsatisfactory outcome. Again, you can change that vocabulary as you feel appropriate. The view you're looking at right now is very much a desktop view, and is great for some scenarios, but we recognise that it might not be perfect for all scenarios. I'm going to hand over to Kevin. Kevin's going to talk you through a slightly different user interface that we can support as well, and then Kevin's going to hand back to me, and I'll show you just a couple of final bits on reporting.
Thank you, John. I assume everyone can see the screen okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. So as John mentioned, what he demonstrated there was really the engine behind the scenes. So in there, we've brought all through the data. We've understood how the relationships work, and we've also built that scoring mechanism that's working to assess what those answers are and what score we should give, and therefore what outcome. But then we looked, based on our experience with CQC and talking to the various inspection managers, we saw that there is potentially a need for being able to get people up to speed very quickly without a lot of training. And then there's various different levels of, I'm going to call tech maturity within the inspectors. So what can we provide to be able to give inspectors so that they can go straight away and start using something so as simple as possible? So over the top of that, we've essentially built some very prototyped applications which all sit on the same platform, all use the same tools, but enable us to build a CQC interface to this. So with that, what I'm showing here is a mobile interface, so this can work on the provided mobile phones for the inspectors. And in there, we've simply got two options. So as John showed previously, we have our decisions that I need to make. So I can open one of these up, and I'm just tapping through this. I can see the summary of information. All of this is configurable. All of this can be changed in terms of what I need to see. But simply, I can just go into here and I can add my desktop inspection and give my reason. And then I'm submit that, and then I'm straight back in. So rather than me needing to go and know where I need to go in terms of the steps, I've got an application that can be on my tablet or on my mobile phone that says these are the steps you need to go through, and very simple. We've also got the option here. So looking at our inspections that we need to do, or assessments, beg your pardon, we can then surface those through here as well. So I can tap through, I can see my assessment. This is a desktop assessment. I'm using it on a mobile phone. These are interchangeable. So if I wanted to do a mobile inspection, I need to cross a threshold, I can take my mobile with me, or I could use this on my tablet, for example, from home or the desktop. Essentially here, I can see that I've made a decision, I need to do this. We've then got our interim assessments. Just pointing out here that we have the ability to have those per core service. So if we're talking to a hospital, we may have multiple core services and multiple assessments, but roll those up to a location. So we can have the multiple iterations here. But essentially, I'm able to tap through, open up my assessment questions, which we've just essentially provided a nice simple UI to use. And I can go through here, tap, 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 fill out my questions, and then complete my inspection. And as I do so, that's then going to the same rules, the same engine behind the scenes, and is recording against this this core service inspection. That's now flagged as completed. I've got my score of 5, and that has resulted in an unsatisfactory score in this instance. Now I'm going to hand back to John, who's then going to take us through, once this then hits that system, what outputs can we then provide?
Thanks, Kevin. So we should have my screen back now, and we're looking at the form that we've just seen Kevin fill in on a mobile device. So we talked a lot when we were in the workshops around how we go about producing outputs. And for the purposes of the prototype, we've put together a very simple Word document, which goes and grabs some information from that assessment record and populates it into a template. So in this case, we can get the location, address, we can get the pertinent individuals, and we've populated the questions and the answers and the supporting information into a table. So we can very, very quickly and easily, without a huge burden on the inspectors going right out a report, we can produce a summary assessment of what the findings were. And we can do that automatically. So that can go straight out as a PDF, it can go to the website, it can go to someone for review first before release. That's entirely up to you, but because we have the data in a form that is structured and readily available in multiple formats, it becomes a far easier task to collate it into a report and then send it out. So that was very much the kind of end-to-end interim assessment process. The other quick thing that we wanted to show you just briefly was how we can use some of this, aggregate some of this data together into dashboards. So we've seen briefly the My Work dashboard. We have a couple of others. So we have one for inspection decision summaries. So this is showing us the breakdown of different location types by their most recent rating. So we can see we've got 2 social care organisations that require improvement, 1 NHS healthcare and 1 independent healthcare, and then that breaks down by the various rating levels. Summary of the different decisions made by location types, and then a summary of the different inspection or assessment types chosen. So we've had 7 mobile inspections against 8 desktop and 2 targeted. And then at any point we can jump into those inspection decision records and take a look at them. And then similarly for the inspection or the end assessment itself, we have another dashboard which is showing us what the different outcomes were, satisfactory against unsatisfactory, with those broken down by week, broken down by inspection type against mobile or desktop, and then if there's a variance between desktop and mobile and the resultant output, satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So these were just some suggestions about how we could start to combine this data. All of these are real time, so the reporting isn't something you have to wait for. It's all there. It's all there in real time for the inspector or for the whoever needs to access it and query it. I'm mindful that's an incredibly whistle-stop tour of quite a large piece of work that we did last week. More than happy to take any comments, questions. Mark, be guided by you.
No, thank you. I'm conscious of time, but Peter, do we have time for questions?
This is so interesting. Let's at least have 5 minutes for questions if anybody wants to, or comments, if anybody wants to raise anything. Can I just, sorry, go on, Ian.
I was going to say, I think I just wanted to take the opportunity just to thank the Microsoft teams and also the many colleagues internally who've contributed to this. I think you heard repeatedly from Mark and also from colleagues from Microsoft that this has been very much a team game. And I think to demonstrate what's been achieved in, I think we're on day 10 now of this activity. This started sort of a week last Monday. For this to be in the position it's in, to be able to be rehearsing this with colleagues internally and getting that feedback is something pretty special. This will inevitably evolve and change over time. But I think the big takeaway point is, as frameworks, this demonstrates the capability of the software. The questions and the way this stuff renders is important. It can change, but I think the really important thing is that it demonstrates that once you structure your data, then you can do all sorts of really fantastic things. And this starts to bring to life some of the conversations we've been having around what the future regulatory platform might look like. And it'll have this sort of look and feel to it. So it starts to get us into that conversation. It is really, really early days, but you could, I'm sure everyone can see how this can be built out to do a much bigger piece of work around inspection.
I was going to thank colleagues as well, but I mean, it seems to me this is probably the best, maybe the only good thing that comes out of COVID-19 as far as we're concerned, because this is really valuable for the here and now, but it's accelerating massively our thinking and our capability for a completely different regulatory model in the future. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So, John and Kevin, thank you so much for serving, and thank you for your time this afternoon.
Could I just ask a quick
pleasure.
question?
John?
Very quick.
Yep.
One is just a suggestion: in your next iteration, you avoid acronyms in the questions you ask of providers. And the second one of your questions was about how many of your staff are infected with COVID-19. Now, I know that was very specific and just pertinent to the circumstances. The reality is people won't know because there won't be the testing done. They'll know if people are off sick, but they won't know they have COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely right. In fact, we've already rewritten that one, John, exactly with that in mind. That there's a more specific set of questions that we need to ask, which we've got now. Quite right.
Great. John, Kevin, Mark, thank you again. Really, really exciting and really impressive that you've done this in such a short time. So thank you. Shall we leave this there, although I could spend all afternoon talking about it, it's so interesting. Give ourselves literally a 5-minute stretch break and then start again in 5 minutes on the final session of the day. Is that okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. Very good. 5 minutes.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks.